Alright, greetings dear students. Basically, right, what I'm going to show you are some guidelines on how to deal with Maya nCloth. Perhaps you can actually look at this video for a little bit of pointers about nCloth itself, but preferably that you all, do a little bit of research on what's nCloth and how do you utilize them and how do you use in common animation situation and so on. Okay, so let me begin. So if you look through the slides, right, I mean, this is just basic explanation what nCloth itself is. Basically very straightforward in usage. So this is something like a cloth. Alright, the nCloth system itself is basically like, if you wear a cloth or you put over that kind of cloth, right, I mean the attribute of the nCloth, it will act like a cloth itself. In a simple nutshell, right, it will wrap around the mesh that you select as the nCloth to be, not really converted into the particle system, but actually attach those kind of like particles calculation onto the mesh itself to react like a cloth itself. So I'm sure some of you actually did this before, and some of you actually explore and so on nCloth itself. So let's just say, right, okay, you all still remember the n particles approach. So basically, if you are dealing with nCloth itself, you need to set the passive collider. So this is something like your passive, right? The passive rigid body that you all played before last time. So you just create passive collider and select the other item, nCloth, create nCloth. And then you can see, right, if your mesh turns to be, okay, right now because I'm running on the wireframe and shaded, so therefore my item itself will be purple, means I'm being told that this is an nCloth. Alright, so whenever you create any nCloth, you will generate a nucleus system. Every nCloth that you created, right, let's just say if I select a secondary nCloth, if I create another nCloth here, let's say 20 by 20 for example, and let's just say if I attach nCloth, create nCloth, you will see that this nCloth itself, right, under the attribute editor, will be under the nucleus 1 setup. Same goes to here. If you still remember when I mentioned about nucleus, let's say if you have nucleus 2, for example, a different nucleus system that's like totally different from number 1, those items between 1 and 2 that will not interact with each other. But if anything, right, if any items, whenever particles or nCloth itself, they will react according to the nucleus that has been established. In a simple nutshell, right, let's just say if I have a third nCloth. Okay, I'm not going to add the subdivision, I'm not going to add more subdivision. So let's just say if I use nCloth, create nCloth, and let's say if I use create new solver as if nucleus 2. So if I press create nCloth, and let's say if I play the simulation, you see that the third nCloth actually penetrates through the items, right? The passive body, the other nCloth that were under the influence of nucleus 1. Therefore, this kind of method, right? Let's say if you have a second nucleus, it's totally dependent, Sometimes if you encounter a situation in which if you want nCloth, right, a number of nCloth to react onto a second nucleus, that can be done on a second model or any other item that has no connection to here. So it's totally depend. But let's just say if you want everything, right, let's say in one scene all items to be influenced by one nucleus, then you might better leave it as it is. Alright, so nCloth itself, right, another thing about nCloth is it's totally dependent on the number of subdivision. Alright, the more subdivision you have, the more nClothy it becomes, the more nCloth it becomes. So, I mean, the more it reacts like a cloth. But sometimes whenever you have nCloth, if they are like, if everything is happening so fast, right, the calculation itself will totally overlap with each other. Alright. And as always, right, we looked at Maya fields before. Nucleus is basically a Maya field. However, the nucleus itself comes together with additional attributes such as the air, okay, and the rest not really that matters most, air and gravity, these two. So it is actually a combination of the field itself where you play around with air and you play around with gravity in these two. So in short, if you change the gravity direction, let's say to 1 positive, so that means your item will be going up to the stratosphere. Alright, the best thing about here, right, is we can actually assign some sort of like a wind attribute. So let's just say if I press 2 here, and let me play. Alright, it's moving at the x direction. Okay, let me just try to increase the speed. As you can see, it's actually, reacting, and is trying to fly over to the x direction. So this kind of approach, right, this one can actually simulate some sort of like a real world environment in which if you have certain influence like a wind influence that you want to imbue onto the object, you can actually adjust. Alright, you can actually adjust and keyframe this item, wind direction or wind noise itself, these three, even density itself, all these four attributes, you can play around. Alright, so let's just say if I play this and then, okay, have something like, let's just say I want the cloth to rest in this position. And as always, you all still remember fill with particles, right? Fill with particles approach. So it's under initial state, set for selected. And at frame 1, it will always be retained at that position because this is the state of the cloth that you establish. Now, about the cloth itself, right? One good thing, there are a few good things that you need to know about the cloth. If you want to play with any of all these dynamic properties like stretch resistance, compression band, yeah, there are a lot of value that you can play around. Let's just say with stretch resistance, right? The lower the value, it will be more gooey in nature, as you can see here. Okay, higher the number, therefore it will be much more rigid in nature. Okay, let's just set this one to 20. Compression, what does it do? Let's see if higher the value. Does it compress? Not much. Not really that compress. If lower the value, it's not too sure what does this do. Maybe you guys can explore it. But let's just say, right, let's just say if you decide to put some sort of like, if you want to put in a specific attribute for the cloth to react according to a specific material, cloth-like material, you can select the cloth, preset, okay, alright, preset. So Maya actually offers a few presets, a few common presets that you can actually imbue onto the cloth itself. So let's say silk, right? If you replace, it will give some sort of like a silk appearance. Actually, there's a description says silk is smooth, lightweight, blah blah blah. So your end cloth in the end will become silky in nature. Let's just say if you put it as a concrete, okay, replace, and therefore it will be much more, as you can see here, it's very rigid. Okay, it's very rigid, too rigid. But anyway, all these presets, I want you all to actually explore each one of these. What is solid rubber, putty, honey, and so on. You can play around with all these settings. You can actually give one of these preset settings, and perhaps you can adjust accordingly, as you can see here. If I change to airbag, right, replace, and you can see it will give some sort of like a suggested dynamic properties that you can insert onto the nCloth itself, as you can see here. Alright, okay. Now I want you all to actually look through this. And the next item would be, okay, I'm going to go through with all of you briefly about some of the common constraints, because you're going to utilize part of this constraint for your homework, for your activities, all right, that you're going to do during the holidays. Since on Wednesday itself, you all choose option 1, in which you want to self-study and do the work at home. All right, there are a number of constraints, as you can see here, that I established. This is actually most of the constraints that I not really narrate, but this one is actually points taken from Maya itself. Where can you find all these constraints? Let me just go up here, right? And constraint, and they are all here. Transform, terrible, slide on surface, point to surface, force field, component to component, or component. Alright, some of them are very straightforward in nature. So let's just say, right, okay, I'm just going to show some of the most common one because I don't have much time to explain. Okay, anyway, right, let's just say if I don't want this item to be nCloth, well, actually I can remove nCloth. to keep it as, in its own neutral state, as you can see here. Alright, so let's just say for the first constraint, the very first constraint would be transform. Okay, let's see, transform. This is very straightforward. Alright, so I need to have this one as an nCloth first. Create nCloth with this. Alright, to create transform, right, to insert transform constraint, you just need to select the vertices. Faces, I'm not quite sure, you can try. And constraint, transform, and when I play, right, basically you are having this kind of like locator, right, this kind of locator to hold, to constrain the nCloth itself, as you can see here. Now this is ideally can be used for, some sort of like a pointer, or one point where you can have some sort of like this, where you can create some sort of like this locator, and you can actually attach this locator onto the character's joint or any other item. So let me just play with the interactive playback for you all to get an idea. So you can use this constraint, right, okay, to simulate this kind of effect. I'm selecting like around how many, let's see, around 9 vertices. You want to have 1 vertices also can, it's up to you. Alright, it's actually up to you. So let's have, well, okay, no need to have very springy appearance. Okay, as you can see here, okay, whoa, too springy. Okay, never mind, just leave it as spring will do. So anyway, right, that's the first one, very straightforward. So if you want to get rid of the constraint, right, as you can see here, you can just delete it. Alright. Now the other item, right, okay, let's see. Okay, let me just adjust this one accordingly. And just 90 degrees. Okay, just place it accordingly like this. Alright, the next constraint, right? The next constraint, let's see what does it do. Okay, we have transformed. There's one more component to component. Okay, in 2016 itself, right, there are actually two types of component and component to component. Not so sure what does this do, but perhaps if you all can try, then you all can find out what it is. But basically for component to component, I can actually have a nCloth, right? An nCloth constraint onto a component, as you can see here, is constraining to a bar, alright? And thus you will get something like this. It will use some sort, it will actually connects all these vertices right onto the, onto the item itself. Hence the word component to component, as you can see like this. So ideally, this one can be used as a pole, to get a flag. But anyway, as you see here, this is an error because everything's moving quite fast. Now, when you want to play nCloth simulation, right? When you want to play nCloth simulation, it is advisable to set to play every frame rather than real time 25 frames per second and so on. Alright. I'm not so sure what component does. Let's see. Let me try to delete the constraint itself. Alright. Let's see whether can. Constraint component. Okay, not quite sure what does this do. If you want to find out about this, right, perhaps you can let me know what does this really do, because I think that is actually a new feature in 2016 component. Alright, this seven is a continuous component measures. Alright, let's see. Oops. Okay, constraint component. Let's play. Okay, not so sure what does this do, but perhaps as if you want to find out, please be my guest, and maybe you can share with me. Alright, maybe I'll stop here because I don't have enough time. I will narrate part 2, right, on the few constraint that's being expressed over here. Alright, some of them might work, some of them might not work, but actually some of the constraints you actually can use for your assignment and final project. Alright, so I'll meet you all in part 2 again. Alright, thanks. I'll see you again.